There is a kind of hurt that becomes difficult to recognize because you have lived with it for too long. It does not always look like cruelty. Sometimes it sounds like a joke at your expense. Sometimes it is a parent making you feel guilty for saying no. Sometimes it is a sibling who only respects your boundaries when those boundaries do not inconvenience them. And because these people are family, you keep finding reasons to excuse what you would never accept from anyone else. You tell yourself they mean well. You say that every family has problems. You remind yourself of everything they have done for you, so you stay quiet. You forgive without seeing change. You make yourself available when you are exhausted. You allow conversations that leave you feeling ashamed, angry, or worthless. And eventually, you become so accustomed to protecting everyone else's feelings that you stop noticing how often your own feelings are being ignored. Family can be one of the greatest sources of strength in a person's life. Loyalty matters, gratitude matters, forgiveness matters. The Stoics did not teach people to abandon relationships whenever they became uncomfortable. They taught duty, patience, justice, and self-command. But none of those virtues require you to become available for repeated mistreatment. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life dealing with difficult people. His answer was not hatred, it was clarity. He understood that you cannot command another person's character, but you can decide whether their behavior will command yours. That is what this video is about. We are going to look at 7 toxic behaviors you should never normalize, even when they come from family. Emotional manipulation, repeated disrespect, boundary violations, guilt used as a weapon, emotional neglect, intimidation and control, and love that disappears whenever you stop being useful or obedient. The goal is not to convince you that every difficult relative is toxic. People make mistakes. Families argue. Someone can hurt you and still be capable of listening, apologizing, and changing. What matters is the pattern. What happens after you speak up? And do they take responsibility, or do they punish you for having a voice? If you have spent years believing that choosing yourself automatically means betraying your family, type "I choose peace" in the comments, not as an attack on anyone, but as a reminder that your well-being belongs in the conversation too. And if you want more lessons on Stoicism, boundaries, self-respect, and human behavior, subscribe to Stoic Heritage. Because the first behavior we need to discuss is one of the hardest to recognize when it comes from someone you love: emotional manipulation. Behavior 1: emotional manipulation. This is what happens when someone learns that controlling your emotions is easier than respecting your decisions. Instead of asking directly for what they want and accepting your answer, they make you feel guilty, ashamed, frightened, or responsible until saying yes feels easier than standing your ground. Family members can be especially effective at this because they know your history. They know what matters to you. They know whether you hate disappointing people. They know whether you were raised to believe that a good son, daughter, brother, or sister always sacrifices. And when they want something, they can press exactly where it hurts. You say you cannot come over this weekend, and suddenly you hear, "We never see you anymore." You explain that you cannot lend money, and the conversation becomes a reminder of everything they have ever done for you. You make a decision they dislike, and instead of discussing it respectfully, they withdraw affection, stop speaking to you, cry until you reverse your decision, or tell other relatives that you have changed. The most confusing part is that manipulation can sound like love. I'm only saying this because I care about you. Family should be there for each other. If you really loved me, you would understand. The words appeal to your conscience, but the purpose is often to remove your freedom to choose. Over time, you begin managing their emotions before you make your own decisions. You ask yourself, how will they react, before you ask, what do I actually believe is right? You start hiding ordinary choices because you do not want another argument. You say yes while feeling resentment because no comes with a punishment you are tired of facing. That is not healthy closeness. Epictetus placed enormous importance on governing your own choices. Your judgment is yours. Your decisions are yours. Another person can disagree with you, but they should not have to break you emotionally before you are allowed to make a decision about your own life. This does not mean ignoring legitimate responsibilities. If you made a promise, keep it. If you harmed someone, take responsibility. If a family member genuinely needs help and you are able to provide it, Generosity can be virtuous, but genuine responsibility is different from responsibility manufactured through guilt. Pay attention to what happens when you calmly say no. Can the person disagree without attacking your character? Can they remain loving even when they do not get what they want? Can they hear your reasons without turning themselves into the victim? If every boundary becomes proof that you are selfish, something is wrong. You do not need to win a long argument with a manipulative person. Sometimes the strongest response is shorter. I understand that you're upset, but my answer is still no. Their disappointment belongs to them. Your decision belongs to you. Love can ask. Love can disagree. Love can even be hurt. But love should not require you to surrender your judgment just to keep the peace. Behavior 2. Repeated disrespect. Not every form of disrespect arrives through shouting or obvious insults. Some of the most damaging versions are small enough to be dismissed individually, but frequent enough to change the way you see yourself. It is the relative who always finds a way to embarrass you in front of other people. The parent who dismisses every accomplishment because it is not the accomplishment they wanted for you. The sibling who turns your insecurities into jokes and then tells you to relax when you stop laughing. It is being interrupted every time you speak, mocked when you become emotional, or treated as though your opinions only matter when they agree with everyone else's. One comment may seem insignificant, but repeated disrespect accumulates. Eventually, you begin preparing yourself before family gatherings. You wonder what they will say this time. You avoid certain subjects because you know they will be used against you. You stop sharing good news because someone will find a way to reduce it. And when you finally object, you may hear the familiar response, "You're too sensitive." That sentence can keep someone silent for years. There is a difference between being unable to tolerate criticism and refusing to tolerate contempt. Healthy families can disagree. Someone who loves you can tell you when they think you are making a mistake, but respect remains present even during disagreement. They do not need to humiliate you in order to make a point. Stoicism does not teach you to become offended by everything. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself not to hand his peace over to rude people. But refusing to be controlled by an insult does not mean volunteering to receive the same insult indefinitely. You can remain calm and still change your access. If someone repeatedly mocks you, you can say, "Don't speak to me that way." If they continue, you can end the conversation. If every gathering becomes an opportunity for humiliation, you can reduce how often you attend. A boundary does not become invalid simply because the other person calls it dramatic. And watch the response when you speak up. A person who cares about you may be surprised, embarrassed, or defensive at first, but they can eventually reflect. A person committed to disrespect often attacks the boundary itself. They tell you that you have changed. They accuse you of thinking you are better than everyone. They make your request for basic dignity sound like arrogance. Do not let that confuse you. Respect is not worship. You are not asking everyone to agree with you or praise everything you do. You are asking to be treated like an adult human being whose feelings and voice have weight. Seneca warned about the influence of the people around us because repeated exposure shapes us. If you remain where contempt is constant, you may eventually begin speaking to yourself with the same contempt. Do not help someone teach you that you are small. You can forgive people without giving them unlimited opportunities to repeat the same behavior. You can love family and still require respect in order for closeness to continue. Behavior 3. Boundary violations. A boundary tells another person where your responsibility ends and theirs begins. It may involve your time, money, home, relationships, privacy, body, possessions, or emotional energy. And in healthy relationships, boundaries do not destroy closeness. They make closeness safer. But some families grow up with the belief that blood cancels privacy. A relative feels entitled to know every detail of your relationship. Someone enters your room or home without permission because we're family. They volunteer your time before asking you. They borrow money and become offended when you ask when it will be returned. They pressure you to attend events after you have already explained that you cannot. They give out your private information because they believe family secrets belong to everyone. Then you finally say, "Please don't do that again," and somehow you become the problem. This is why boundary setting can feel so difficult. The person violating the boundary often experiences your new limit as rejection because they were comfortable with the old access. If you have always answered every call, your decision not to answer during work may look like distance. If you have always lent money, your first no may look selfish. If you have always allowed intrusive questions, refusing to answer one may suddenly be described as disrespect. But their discomfort does not automatically mean your boundary is wrong. The Stoics constantly separated what belongs to us from what belongs to others. You are responsible for communicating your limits with as much fairness as possible. You are not responsible for making everyone happy about those limits. A useful boundary is clear and connected to your own behavior. Instead of trying to control another adult by saying, "You are never allowed to raise your voice," you can say, "If the conversation becomes insulting or aggressive, I will leave and we can speak later." Now the boundary is something you can actually enforce, and enforcement matters. A boundary you repeatedly announce but never act on eventually becomes a request. If someone learns that they can ignore your no until you become tired enough to surrender, they have no reason to take the next no seriously. Start with what matters most. Maybe you stop discussing your finances with a relative who uses that information against you. Maybe you stop lending money you cannot afford to lose. Maybe you refuse surprise visits. Maybe you end phone calls when insults begin. You do not need 10 boundaries overnight. Choose one. Communicate it. Keep it. There may be guilt. There may be resistance. There may even be relatives who recruit other people to pressure you. That reaction can be uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the same thing as wrongdoing. Your family can love you without owning your schedule. They can care about you without having unlimited access to your private life. They can disagree with a boundary without being entitled to break it. Your no does not need to become cruel in order to become firm. Behavior 4. Guilt, used as a weapon. Guilt can be useful when it points towards something we genuinely did wrong. If you betrayed someone's trust, neglected an obligation, or harmed someone through selfish behavior, guilt can push you to repair what you damaged. But manufactured guilt is different. Manufactured guilt does not ask, "Did you act wrongly?" It tells you, "You are wrong because you did not give me what I wanted." This happens frequently in families, because obligation is easy to exploit. A parent reminds an adult child of the sacrifices made while raising them, as though parenting created a permanent debt. A sibling keeps a record of old favors and produces that record whenever they need something. A relative treats every holiday, visit, loan, or request as a measurement of whether you truly love the family. If you decline, the accusations begin. "So this is what we've become? Don't forget who was there for you. I guess your family doesn't matter anymore." These statements are powerful because they do not address the actual decision. They attack your identity. Instead of discussing whether you can afford the money, whether you have time for the visit, or whether the request is reasonable, you are suddenly defending whether you are a good person. And once you are defending your character, the original question disappears. Marcus Aurelius believed that actions should be guided by reason and virtue rather than applause or fear of criticism. That matters here. Do the right thing because it is right, not because someone has frightened you with the possibility of being called selfish. Sometimes the right thing will be helping your family. Sometimes it will be saying no. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Ask yourself a few questions when guilt appears. Did I actually violate a responsibility? Or is someone disappointed because I have a limit? Did I make a promise that I am now refusing to keep? Or did they assume I would agree? Am I hurting someone unnecessarily? Or am I simply choosing something they do not like? Those questions bring you back to reality. You are allowed to be generous without becoming financially responsible for every relative. You are allowed to love your parents without obeying every adult decision they want to make for you. You are allowed to care about a sibling without becoming available for every crisis they create. And you do not always owe a long explanation. Sometimes explanations invite negotiation. You give 5 reasons for saying no, and the other person tries to defeat all 5. Then you give 5 more. Eventually, you are asking them to approve your boundary. Stop doing that. A respectful answer can be enough. "I can't do that. I'm not available. That doesn't work for me." Guilt may still appear afterward. Let it appear. Feelings do not always tell the truth. Sometimes, guilt is not proof that you have done something wrong. Sometimes, it is simply the feeling of doing something different after years of being trained to put yourself last. Behavior 5. Emotional neglect. This one can be difficult to explain because there may be no dramatic event to point toward, no screaming, no obvious insult, no single moment everyone would immediately recognize as harmful. Instead, there is absence. You reach out when you are struggling, and the conversation is quickly changed. You accomplish something important, and there is little interest. You listen to their problems for hours, but when you begin talking about yours, they suddenly need to go. You remember their birthdays, appointments, worries, and milestones, while they seem to know almost nothing about what is happening inside your life. You may even tell yourself that this is normal because they provide in other ways. Maybe a parent worked hard and kept food on the table. Maybe a sibling would help in a practical emergency. Those things matter. But practical support and emotional presence are not always the same thing. Repeated emotional neglect can teach a person to stop asking. You learn that expressing pain creates awkwardness. You learn that needing comfort makes you inconvenient, so you become the strong one. You handle everything privately. Other people begin praising your independence, without realizing that some of that independence was built because you stopped expecting anyone to show up emotionally. Then something strange happens. When someone finally offers genuine care, you may not know how to receive it. The Stoic tradition is sometimes misunderstood as emotional suppression, but Stoicism is not the belief that feelings should be denied. The Stoics wanted emotions examined rather than blindly obeyed. They valued friendship deeply. Seneca's letters show a man who cared enormously about companionship, grief, loyalty, and human connection. So do not use Stoicism to tell yourself that needing support is weakness. Human beings need one another. The important question is whether you keep demanding emotional nourishment from someone who has repeatedly shown that they are unwilling or unable to provide it. You cannot force a relative to become emotionally available. You can tell them what you need. You can give them an opportunity to understand, but if the same absence continues, you may need to stop building your emotional life around the hope that one day they will become a completely different person. That can be painful, especially when the person is a parent. You may spend years waiting for a conversation, an apology, an expression of pride, or a kind of affection they have never known how to give. Accepting that limitation does not mean pretending it never hurt. It means you stop abandoning yourself while waiting for them to repair the wound. Build relationships with people capable of reciprocity. Learn to share with trustworthy friends. If needed, seek appropriate professional support. Give yourself permission to acknowledge what was missing. You are not demanding too much simply because you want to be heard. And you do not have to keep returning to the same empty place, hoping that this time it will finally give you what it has never been willing to give. Behavior 6. Intimidation and control. Some people do not need to physically touch you to make you afraid. Their anger does the work. Their tone does the work. The threat of what might happen if you disagree becomes enough to shape your behavior. You learn to study their mood before you speak. If they seem angry, you postpone the conversation. If they enter the room irritated, everyone becomes careful. You choose your words based on what will keep them calm, rather than what you genuinely think. And after enough time, you may call this keeping the peace. But peace that requires everyone else to live in fear is not peace. Control can also be less explosive. A family member may demand to know where you are, who you are with, how you spend your money, what you wear, whom you date, or what career you choose. They may use financial support as leverage. They may threaten to withdraw affection, housing, money, or family acceptance unless you obey. The details differ, but the message is the same. Your autonomy is acceptable only when your choices match theirs. Epictetus knew more about external control than most philosophers because he lived part of his life enslaved. His philosophy placed extraordinary value on the part of a person that cannot be morally surrendered without their participation, judgment, choice, and character. That does not mean every situation is safe enough for confrontation. This is important. If intimidation includes threats, physical violence, stalking, coercive control, or credible fear for your safety, The priority is not delivering a perfect Stoic speech. The priority is safety. Distance, trusted support, and professional or local assistance may be necessary. You do not prove courage by remaining in danger. For less immediate situations, begin by noticing how much of your life is organized around avoiding someone's reaction. What would you choose if you were not afraid of their anger? What would you say if you knew you would not be punished for disagreeing? Those questions can reveal how much control has already been surrendered. A controlling person may call independence disrespect. They may say you have become difficult because you no longer ask permission for adult decisions. They may accuse outside friends or partners of changing you, simply because those relationships helped you realize that fear is not normal. Do not confuse their loss of control with your loss of character. You can remain respectful while becoming harder to intimidate. You can speak calmly. You can refuse to shout back. You can leave conversations that become threatening. You can stop explaining decisions that are yours to make. Fear should not be the price of belonging to a family. Love does not need you frightened in order to keep you close. And anyone who can only maintain influence by making you afraid of what happens when you say no is not asking for respect. They are asking for submission. Behavior 7. Conditional love. This is affection that feels secure only while you are performing the role someone wants from you. You are loved when you agree, praised when you succeed in the way they approve, welcomed when you are useful, included when you remain compliant. But make a decision they dislike, and the temperature changes. Affection disappears. Calls stop. Support becomes criticism. Suddenly, the same people who told you family is forever begin treating belonging as something you must earn back. This can shape a person for years. A child who receives warmth mainly after achievement may grow into an adult who believes rest has to be earned. Someone whose family withdraws affection during disagreement may become terrified of conflict in future relationships. They learn to shapeshift. They study what other people want and become that version of themselves, because authenticity feels dangerous. Eventually, they may not even know what they want. They know how to keep everyone else pleased. They know which opinions are safe. They know which dreams will receive approval. But ask them what they would choose without anyone judging them, and the answer becomes difficult. That is the cost of conditional affection. Now, healthy love does not mean approving every decision. Your family can love you and strongly disagree with you. They can refuse to support harmful behavior. They can have boundaries of their own. Unconditional care is not unlimited permission. The difference is whether your basic dignity remains intact when you disagree. Marcus Aurelius encouraged himself to meet people with justice and goodwill without surrendering his principles. That balance matters. You can love a family member without becoming the person they designed for you. You are allowed to choose a career they would not have chosen. You are allowed to marry someone they did not imagine. You are allowed to change your mind, develop different interests, build different traditions, or decide that certain family patterns will end with you. Their disappointment may be real, but disappointment is not ownership. And if affection is repeatedly withdrawn to force obedience, recognize what is happening. You are being taught that love is payment for compliance. Do not carry that lesson into every future relationship. Healthy love can survive the sentence, "I disagree with you." Healthy love can survive a boundary. Healthy love can survive growth. You should not have to become smaller every time someone close to you becomes uncomfortable with who you are becoming. If you recognize yourself in this, remember something important. You do not need to perform perfectly to deserve basic respect. Your worth is not a family vote. It does not increase when everyone approves and disappear when someone is disappointed. Love should make room for a person to exist. If someone only loves the version of you they can control, then what they are protecting may not be the relationship. They may be protecting the role they expected you to keep playing. Recognizing toxic behavior is one thing. Acting on what you recognize is harder. You may listen to everything we have discussed and immediately know which relative fits which pattern. You may remember conversations you tried to forget. You may finally have language for something that has bothered you for years. Then, the guilt arrives. What if I'm being too harsh? What if they never speak to me again? What will the rest of the family say? What if I'm the problem? Those questions can pull you straight back into old behavior. This is why boundaries need more than anger. Anger can help you recognize that something is wrong, but anger alone is difficult to sustain wisely. What you need is a clear understanding of what you will do differently. The Stoics use the image of an inner stronghold, the part of yourself where judgment and character are protected from being ruled by outside events. That does not mean shutting everyone out. A fortress with no gates becomes a prison. It means you decide what receives access and under what conditions. Start small if you need to. You do not have to solve your entire family history in one weekend. Choose one behavior you will no longer cooperate with. If conversations become insulting, end them. If someone pressures you for money, stop answering immediately. Give yourself time to decide. If a relative asks invasive questions, say, "I'm not discussing that." If someone arrives uninvited, do not automatically reward the behavior by changing all your plans. Then expect resistance. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not celebrate your growth. They may call you selfish. They may say someone has influenced you. They may remind you of the person you used to be. And perhaps they are right about one thing: you are changing. You are learning that being loving does not require being endlessly accessible. You are learning that forgiveness does not require restored access. You are learning that understanding why someone behaves badly does not require volunteering to keep receiving the behavior. This is also where discernment matters. Not every difficult relationship requires permanent separation. Sometimes a clear boundary improves the relationship. Sometimes reduced contact is enough. Sometimes a conversation changes things. And sometimes, when harm is severe or persistent, greater distance is necessary. Choose the response that fits the reality, not the response that creates the most drama. If you have reached this point in the video, and you are ready to stop confusing guilt with responsibility, type "My peace matters" in the comments. Let it be a commitment to think before automatically surrendering your needs. Then practice. The first no may feel terrible. The second may still feel uncomfortable, but every time you act according to a reasonable boundary, you prove to yourself that discomfort can be survived. You do not need everyone to understand your decision before you are allowed to protect yourself. You need enough clarity to know why the decision became necessary. There is one final lesson that matters, because boundaries can go wrong in another direction. After years of being manipulated, disrespected, controlled, or ignored, it can be tempting to become hard toward everyone. You tell yourself you will never trust again. You cut people off at the first disagreement. You interpret every request as manipulation, and every mistake as proof that someone is toxic. That is not freedom either. The goal is not to move from having no boundaries to building walls so high that nobody can reach you. The goal is to develop judgment. Stoicism asks you to see people clearly, without allowing their faults to turn you into someone you do not respect. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that difficult people act from their own understanding. That perspective did not require him to approve of harmful behavior. It helped him resist hatred. You can understand someone and still keep your distance. You can forgive and still refuse to return to the old relationship. You can wish a relative well and decide that they no longer receive unrestricted access to you. These things can exist together, and sometimes the relationship may improve. A family member may finally realize that the old behavior no longer works. They may apologize. They may begin respecting limits. If change is genuine and consistent, you are allowed to recognize it. But do not confuse promises with change. Watch behavior over time. The person who respects your boundary only until they want something has not learned the boundary. The person who apologizes and repeats the same cruelty every month has not repaired the pattern. Trust can be rebuilt, but rebuilding requires evidence. And if evidence never comes, you are still allowed to move forward. You cannot spend your entire life waiting for another person to become capable of giving you what they have repeatedly refused to give. Your responsibility is not to force them to change. Your responsibility is to decide what kind of treatment you will continue accepting. So ask yourself one final question. Who benefits when you stay silent about behavior that keeps hurting you? If the answer is everyone except you, something has to change. Maybe that change is one honest conversation. Maybe it is a new boundary. Maybe it is less access. Maybe it is walking away from a relationship that has repeatedly made you afraid, ashamed, or small. Whatever the answer is, choose it from clarity rather than revenge. If this video spoke to something you have lived through, type "I deserve respect" in the comments. And subscribe to Stoic Heritage for more lessons on Stoicism, self-respect, boundaries, emotional discipline, and protecting your peace. You do not have to hate your family to stop accepting harmful behavior. You do not have to erase every good memory to admit that something is hurting you now. And you do not have to destroy yourself to prove that you love someone. Care for people where you can. Forgive where wisdom allows. Help when help is right. But remember that your life is also your responsibility. Protect your character. Protect your judgment. Protect your peace. And never confuse losing access to someone with losing your worth.